Hey there, Wastelander, and welcome to Fallout on Tabletop. Today we'll be taking a look at the Fallout Factions rulebook so we can learn how to play Fallout Factions. We've also been looking more in depth at the Fallout Factions Nuka World 2-player starter set, as it's a great way to get into the game, and we've done a deep dive into the contents that are included in that box, although everything that is in that box besides the tape measure actually is available separately. So if you're interested in the game but not interested in, for example, like the pack or the operators that come in that box, you can still get everything that you need for Fallout Factions, like the mat, dice, and tokens separately, as well as terrain. And then you can pick some of the different factions like Brotherhood of Steel, Super Mutants, Survivors, or Wasteland Raiders, as well as some others coming up later this year. But if whether or not you have models already or not, we'll be looking at how to play Fallout Factions in this video. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. All right, so here we have a brief little scenario set up for explaining how to play Fallout Factions. There is a quick start guide available on the Modiphius website, although it has just a few less rules than a standard game. And really, the difference between that and like the regular rules, you could say, isn't too difficult or intense. And so we will just be using the standard rules that you can get in the Fallout Factions core rulebook. And although you do get a rule book in the Fallout Factions Nuka World 2-player starter set, Modiphius has noted in both like the newest rule book that basically if you find that there's differences in rules, you should always prioritize the newest publication. So meaning right now between the Fallout Factions Nuka World rule book and the core rule book, any rules that you see in the core rule book are the rules that you should be going by. And so that's also the rules that we'll be going by for this demo here. You can see that we've got our operator's boss with shish kebab and plasma pistol. We've got a scaver, or basically a grunt, with a combat rifle. And for the pack, we have a psycho with baseball bat and pistol, and or 10 millimeter pistol, and we have a waster grunt as well for the pack with a hand weapon and pipe revolver. And then we do have our search token over here, and we do have our priority token as well. So in a normal game of Fallout Factions, you typically will set up your terrain with your opponent, and then you'll choose your table edge or quarter when setting up your models. And so typically it's just opposite corners, but the game mode can dictate that. But in this scenario, we won't get into that. They will explain in either of the books whatever scenario you choose to play. So in this scenario here, the priority goes to the operators. And so the operators will be able to activate and start doing things with their crew first. The operators want to get to this search token and try to rummage around for some supplies. But in order to do that, they're going to have to maybe deal with some of these pack members. So first up, I'll choose to activate the operator's boss. And simply by activating the boss, I will then get to choose an action to do with him. And I want to get up to that token. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to move my model. And in Fallout Factions, you can move all your models up to 8 inches unless they have a rule that says otherwise. You can break up that movement, and you can go over things. You can climb buildings, and you can get off of buildings as well. So in this case, I could move that full 8 inches to get onto the token. However, there's a few things in my way. First of all, there's this fence, in which case, because it is a minor terrain piece, which we've gone over in prior videos, with the major terrain pieces being like the buildings, minor ones being like the fence, and the decorative terrain pieces being these small trash cans. The minor terrain pieces and the major terrain pieces we do have to account for with gameplay. And so because it's in the way of my movement, I would have to basically jump over or move over it. And by doing so, I just measure how tall that object is and then subtract that from the movement of the model. It's 1 inch. So instead of being able to move 8 inches, I'm only going to be able to move 7 inches. Furthermore, when I do move my model, if I get in within 1 inch, or what's called proximity, of an enemy model, you basically have to stop there unless you want to get into melee. And I think I do, because I've got a good weapon and some good stats. So I'm going to just complete that extra bit of movement, and it was less than my 7 inches. So now I am engaged with that member of the pack. I have done one movement action. So then I will take my tokens, and here we have the weary, and that flips over to the exhausted. But I've only done one action, and that is the get moving action. So I just simply place that by the model to represent the fact that I have done one of my 2 actions for the turn. Now that I'm engaged in melee with the pack member, I can use the brawl action, in which case I will be able to choose my target, which if there were more, I would have to choose between them. But in this case, there is only the one. So I've chosen that. Then I make my attack test, which is a special test. And special tests are going to be using your D10s. And so I look at the rule book for the stats of both my model and the weapon that they have. In this case, I put that also on my crew roster. The shish kebab is a 4S test, or 4 strength. So I'm going to be rolling, at least to start with, 4 dice, and I'll compare that to my strength. However, when I have my special test, you also then get to add some extra dice or even swap them out. In this case, the first thing you'll do is then look at, after looking at the test, type, or in how many dice you need to start, which in this case it's 4. I will then look at the model's luck characteristic, and in this case, he's a champion, and he's a pretty good one at that, and he has a 3 luck. So I will take my luck die, or just a different colored D10, and I will replace those regular dice with those. So I still have 4, but now I have 3 luck dice and 1 standard die. In this case now, when I do the brawl action, you do get some even more bonus die. And in this case, because I moved into engagement range of the model with the get moving action against them this turn, I get to add 1 more die. I would get to add more bonus die if another friendly model was engaged with them as well, but they're not. So in this case, I just get to roll 5 dice. So I will roll these and hope they're good, but in my case, they are not very good. But they work out for our purposes of this video. In Fallout Factions, unlike a lot of other games where you may want a high roll, Fallout Factions, you actually want low rolls. So you actually want to roll equal to or less than your stat. And again, this model is using strength with the shish kebab, and he has a strength of 5. So I do got a number of misses, and I only have 1 hit. However, I do hit with my critical or luck dice. So I do get a critical, in which case with a critical, you get to roll one extra bonus die for each critical, which in this case it's only one, and I get another hit. Now I'll go on to doing my damage, in which case I have only got 2 hits, and you compare that then to the endurance of the model you're targeting. In this case, it is a lower level grunt for the pack, and their endurance is only a 3. However, I only got 2 hits, and so because the number of hits is less than the endurance, I only get to add 1 harm. If my hits equaled or exceeded the endurance of the model, meaning if I got 3 or more hits, it would cause an injury. And then if you look at the model's health characteristic, you just take off 1 of those health. And in this case, this model only does have 1 health. So if I just rolled a little bit better, he would be able to incapacitate that model in 1 blow. But dice weren't with me, and so the model just sits there with 1 harm. However, because I also did roll the critical, I can look at the stats of the shish kebab and see that it has the Ignite 2 critical effect, in which case, if your luck die also get a hit, not only do you get the extra dice to try to roll and get more hits, but then you trigger that critical effect, and it will state in the rule book what that critical effect does. And in this case, the pack member will say saves against the Ignite, so no further damage is done, but depending on the critical, different effects will happen against those models. I did complete my second action with the brawl action here. So now this model flips that weary token to exhausted, and now they are no longer able to do any actions for this turn, as we are playing rounds, up to 5 rounds in Fallout Factions, and you taking turns with your model, and then when everybody's done taking turns, you'll move on to the next round. So now that I've activated with my operator boss, I'm going to choose to then activate here with my members of the pack. And I am engaged with the operator boss, and so I could choose to use the brawl action, but as we saw, that weapon is pretty scary, and this model isn't really that good in combat, or at least against the boss in combat. So I'm going to want to get away using one of the other actions you can do while engaged, which is simply the back off action. In the back off action, you simply can just move 2 inches away from whomever you're engaged with, using the normal rules for movement, where you move front to front with your base. You can't be within proximity or engagement of other enemy models, but then you're just 2 inches away in a slightly better position, hopefully, or at least opening it up for your pals to come join in the fight. In this case, the brawl action is just 1 action as well. So now the waster here is weary. Although they can do another action, I am going to hold off to maybe see if I want to do something else, because you can choose to then now pass to the operators, or I could choose to do an action. You are free to do whatever you would like in that regard. However, you can only do the same action once in a row unless it says otherwise. So if you wanted to get moving, for example, twice, you can't do that twice in a row. You would have to get moving, pass to your opponent, they activate a model, and then you can get moving again. Or if you do want to get moving faster, you can actually do the hurry action as a part of get moving, in which case instead of moving 8 inches, you do move 12. So a little bit more movement there instead of having to break up and pass to your opponent. The other way to get around this kind of you can't do the two of the same actions in a row mechanic in Fallout Factions is if your weapon has the fast characteristic. Now, none of the operators' weapons are fast. However, the pack members have some items that are fast, with the hand weapon here on the Scaver and the 10mm pistol on the Psycho is fast as well, in which case the Psycho will take a shot with the 10mm pistol, and they'll see that that is, again, just 3 shots with a 3 agility. And so they'll start with 3 regular dice, and then again, they'll look at their luck stat, in which case their luck is a 2. So then they get to swap out those dice and switch them with the luck dice. And then, because they're shooting a ranged attack with the open fire action against a model that is otherwise not being blocked by any other models or by any piece of terrain, they are out in the open, you actually get a bonus die. So that is a good reason as to why having a good amount of terrain in Fallout Factions is a good thing, because you get more bonus dice to try to wound models if they're out in the open, like this guy is. So again, you'll just roll your dice to see what you get, and this time I actually get 2 hits with the 10mm pistol, and again, I am looking for 4 or less. The Cappy here is a 1, the 0 is actually a 10, so I get 2 hits and 2 misses. I do get one of those is a critical, and that unfortunately misses, and the 10mm pistol does not have a crit effect. So then I will just look to see that I got 2 hits. The endurance of this model is a 5. So again, just like against the Scaver, it's not enough to do an injury, but I'll still just put 1 harm on that model there. And then I could shoot again because it's got the fast trait, but there is still this model here that hasn't activated, and I may want to rummage and search that token so the operators can't get it. So I'm going to then pass to the operators. In this case, the operators will have their model stay back. They have a really good range with the combat rifle, and so they're not going to want to risk getting into melee with them. They're going to want to use that range to do their damage instead. So the model is going to then look at either of these and choose which one. And because this model could activate next turn to search that token, they are going to try to take them out this turn by targeting the Scaver next to the token. And in this case, just like before, when you do the open fire action or the brawl action, you'll start with getting a special dice or special test and taking your 10-sided dice, looking at the stat of the weapon. In this case, it is a 4P test, or 4 perception. So we've seen strength, agility, and now perception with our tests. You'll take the 4 dice that you start with. They also, just like the Psycho, have 2 luck, and so you'll replace those dice. Unfortunately, this bit of terrain here with if you look down more at the level of the model, you'll see it more clearly, but this minor piece of terrain does block line of sight between the 2 models. When determining line of sight, you just draw a straight line between your model and their model. You ignore like extra bits, so like these hand weapon or the shish kebab or even the pistol or like decorative pieces of terrain on the base. You have to hit the torso, and in this case the torso is getting blocked by this bench. So I'm not going to get that wide open extra dice like I did against the operator's boss, but I do get an extra bonus die for each harm on the model. And in this case, this model does have one harm, so I get one extra dice, and I'll then roll my special test. And in this case, I need to get a 4 or less, in which case I got 3 hits, with one of them being a crit, which allows me to roll this again, and unfortunately it was a 7, so that misses. But between these misses, I got 3 hits still, and again I compare my number of hits to the endurance of the model, and in this case the endurance of this model is only 3. So as long as the hits equals or exceeds the endurance, you cause an injury. And in this case, this model only has 1 wound or 1 health, meaning they are now incapacitated, so you would remove them from the game. However, in Fallout Factions, you kind of have like a morale test system, or in this case, a confusion test when a model is incapacitated. So when making a confusion test when a model is incapacitated, before you remove them from the game, you'll measure from their base up to 3 inches, and any of your friendly models within 3 inches of that incapacitated model will take a confusion test. So that means the psycho was a little bit too close, and it might be a little bit unnerved by seeing one of their fellow pack members taken down so viciously from afar. So we'll go ahead and remove that model from the game, and along with all their tokens. And now we'll make a special test with, or the confusion special test. In this case, it's 2I or 2 intelligence. So I'm rolling 2 dice, and I'm also going to look at the intelligence of the psycho. And, well, as the name might dictate, they're a bit psycho and maybe not as intelligent as we would like. And so I'm going to roll these dice and compare it to their intelligence score, which, like we did with hitting, unfortunately, these are too high for our own good, and he fails the confusion test. If you fail the confusion test, you take fatigue, in which case you would just flip over the weary token into exhausted. If you can't take fatigue, in this case, if I was already fully fatigued with the purple, I would actually run off the board basically, and that model would run away after seeing his friend die. So even though I failed, I just am going to lose out on an action. If only one of these dice was lower, like a 2, nothing would happen. So you just need one of these 2 to be less than your intelligence to pass. Otherwise, you just take fatigue. If you can't take fatigue, your model runs away. All right, and so that ends that action. However, it would now go back to the pack, and the pack doesn't have any models to activate, so they pass. And in Fallout Factions, the first player to either pass or have all of their models exhausted actually becomes the next priority player. And so now for the next round, the pack would get to go first. That does mean you can strategically be first player and then activate maybe some of your models, and then choose to not activate any of them anymore and keep the priority token to start multiple turns in a row. Now that the pack player has passed, it has been their turn. So normally you can't, use the same action twice in a row, but because it actually did pass to the pack player, the operators would get to go again. in which case they'll try to shoot this guy, and then that way they can start in a even better position for the next round. All right, and so they've rolled some dice, they've done one harm, and they've become now exhausted after shooting twice and incapacitating one enemy model. And at that point, when all of the models are exhausted or one or both players have passed, you'd simply go on to the next round with whoever then starts with the priority token, and you would clear off the exhausted or weary tokens. However, you do keep your harm going into the next round. It is the pack's turn, and they do want to get into the rummage action here because they want to be able to get some chems or supplies for this game. And so they'll start by activating this model, and they'll move. They can move up to 8 inches, in which case they easily be within the 1-inch range of this token. And then they'll be weary, and then they'll use their next action to search or rummage the token. In this case, they get to choose if they want to try to find chems or if they want to find caps and parts. Either way, you'll roll 2 dice, and if you are looking for chems, you total the amount that you got. So in this case, 13, in which case I would find 13 caps worth of chems. And as we saw on the crew roster, chems have certain price, and so you'll then take the caps to buy one or more chems depending on how well you rolled. And any excess caps that you get from this are not used. And so if you have like a chem that costs 10, you would use the 10 caps, and then that's all you would do with the chem. And if you do roll an 18 or higher with your 2 10-sided die, you do find a rare chem, which there's a special table for that as well. And you'll just get whatever is on that rare chem table. If you are looking for caps and parts, the die with the higher result is how many caps you find, and the lower one is how many parts. So this case, I would find 9 caps and 4 parts, and then I would write that on my crew roster, in which case for like campaign play especially, the caps and parts are used in the campaign play. And finishing up here, there is things called the ploy with the ploy token, and each crew will have access to 3 standard ploys that anybody can use, and each crew also, or each faction has 2 unique ploys that they can do. So you'll have a total of 5 different ploys you can do. However, you can only do a ploy for every token that you have, and if you start out with only tier 1, you basically only get 1 ploy. You get 1 ploy per tier. And so at the max of tier 3, you only get 3 of these ploys. You can only ever do 1 of the ploys per game, so you can't do the same ploy twice unless you have something else. And the ploys will tell you when you can use them. So sometimes they may be at the start of turn, end of turn, start of an activation, but the ploys will tell you basically when you can do it and what you can do. And so with that, we would play out the rest of our rounds and getting on to other turns. When one side is fully wiped out, the other side would win. Or if you would get to like the end of your rounds and there's like objectives or tokens, you would just look at the mission to see what you would need to do to fulfill victory conditions. You can also choose at any point when you're the active player to flee and run away, in which case you'll give up a lot of points to your opponent potentially, but you'll have less of your models hopefully die. in which case they can live to fight another day. But that is a brief rundown of how to play Fallout Factions. All right, and there we have how to play Fallout Factions. So after watching the video on how to play, hopefully you're interested in playing, or you've learned enough about the game that you are hooked and want to get into it, in which case there are some affiliate links down below to pick up some copies of the various game pieces and miniatures that you'll need to get started with Fallout Factions. And if you're interested in more Fallout Factions or Fallout miniature related content, you can like and subscribe for those videos, as now that we're through the Fallout Factions Nuka World 2-player starter set, we'll look further into the game with the core rule book and the other factions in there, as well as the last remaining Nuka World faction with the Disciples. And coming up this year in 2026, we'll be getting things like the Crew Folio and the Battle for Boston starter set, as well as like the Institute and Minutemen. Just loads more content coming up for Fallout Factions. So hopefully you like what you see, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.